We are looking together at the book of Proverbs concerning the theme of discipline this week. We've looked at God's discipline of us and why He does it out of the motivation of love and keeping us on the right path. We spent 3 days looking at principles that reflect God's love for us and God's discipline that parents should follow in raising their own children. And we'll close up the week by looking at responses to discipline, both good and bad. We're starting here, first of all, with chapter 6, verse 20. And one of the responses that God would have us have to discipline is to heed it or follow it. Look at chapter 6, verse 20. He says, "My son, observe the commandments of your father, and do not forsake the teaching of your mother. Bind them continually on your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you walk about, they will guide you. When you sleep, they will watch over you. When you are awake, they will talk to you." This is very similar to what we see in places like Deuteronomy chapter 6, when it talks about telling the people of Israel to go into the land. When they go into the land, here's what they are to do with the Word of God, and how their parents should train their children to handle the Word of God and live by the Word of God. Very, very similar to that Deuteronomy chapter 6 passage there. But he's talking now directly to the recipients of instruction and discipline. And he says, "My son." Now, how are we as children of parents, how are we to handle the discipline and the instruction that comes our way? Or even as children of God, how are we to handle God's discipline and God's instruction in our lives? And so he tells us here, and he's talking to his son in this case, and he's saying, look, listen to what your father has to say. Listen to what your mother is trying to teach you. And when he says, tie it around your neck, and when you walk, they'll guide you, and when you sleep, they'll watch over you. These are all pictures of how influential these teachings, these instructions given by a godly mom and dad should be in our lives. Now remember, as we said a couple of days ago, these are proverbs. They're not absolute truth. So that means this, that not every child has a parent who is going to lead them in the way of righteousness. Sadly, many children have delinquent parents. Many children have godless parents who are actually teaching them to go the wrong direction. It's just sad and ugly and just breaks our heart to know that that's true. But it is true. Those kinds of parents will not lead you in the way of righteousness. But the parent who in themselves are heeding the instructions and the disciplines of God can now take those same instructions and disciplines and talk to their children, guide their children, train their children in those things. And so as parents do that, the wise child will listen. They will pay attention. They will heed, and they will follow that kind of instruction. And they will be blessed for having done so. Here's another response that we're given to instruction and discipline, and that's chapter 12, verse 1. "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid." So here's a second response, and that is to love discipline, proper biblical training, godly training, and proper correction or reproof. If you hate correction, he says you're stupid. That's pretty clear, isn't it? If you won't be corrected, if you won't let others speak into your life and show you areas where you're wrong, when you're going the wrong direction, then that's foolishness, that's stupidity. But the one who loves discipline, who accepts correct discipline from God, from His Word, from godly people, from parents, that individual is one who loves knowledge. They love truth, and that will reflect in every area and aspect of their life. Now here's one more response. Those are two positive ones. Now there is a negative one mentioned in the book of Proverbs, and that's chapter 29 and verse 1, when it says this, "A man who hardens his neck after much reproof will suddenly be broken beyond remedy." That's a sad verse, isn't it? The person who constantly resists and hardens themselves against proper correction and instruction from God and godly people, including parents, the one who does that will suddenly be broken beyond remedy. So the consequence of rejecting the truth is ruin. The consequence of rejecting proper discipline, proper instruction from God or those who are godly is to invite ruin into our lives. Pay close attention to that, because when we resist out of pride or anger or whatever is going on in our hearts, it's someone who's trying to help us walk in righteousness, or even God himself and his word. When we resist that, the option is ruin. It will lead to the consequences of destruction in our lives. That's an awful consequence. No one, of course, wants that, but many invite that by resisting the proper correction and training and discipline that the Lord provides to us in his word and through his godly people and through godly parents. So this has been our discussion on discipline. I hope it's been helpful. I trust you'll have a wonderful weekend in the Lord.